Welcome back to the deep dive. So today we are tackling, a pretty huge challenge, I think. It's about trying to square this ancient idea of spiritual perfection with, the reality of modern office life. Deadlines, pressure.
Exactly. And the mission here really is to look at these ancient texts, the Shastras, which are quite prescriptive, and see if we can pull out a practical path for you, the listener, someone who's juggling a job, maybe a family, the need to earn a living.
Right. So we're diving deep into what the ideal day looks like for a Sri Vaishnava devotee. It's called the Panchakala Prakriya.
That's it. And forget your standard work-life balance ideas.
That's right.
It's more fundamental. It's a framework for turning basically every minute into Kainkaryam service.
And we really need that kind of structure, don't we? Because the day laid out by the great teachers, the Purvacharyas like Ramanujacharya, well, it just doesn't map onto a 9 to 5 schedule, not easily anyway.
Not at all.
Yeah.
So what we'll do is unpack this ideal 5-part day first. Then we'll dig into the philosophy behind it, which is really powerful. And then we'll try to build a realistic roadmap for how you might adapt it.
Okay, so those 5 parts.
Right. 5 kriyas or activities. First is abhigamanam. That's like approaching Bhagavan, getting ready. Then upadanam, gathering the stuff you need. Third is ija, the main worship itself. Fourth is swadhyaya study, learning, teaching. And finally, yoga contemplation, meditation.
Got it. 5 steps. So let's start by stepping back in time. Understand that ideal day first.
Yeah, you really have to picture it, don't you? Imagine Ramanujacharya in Srirangam. No smartphones, no electric lights. Life moves with the sun, the river, the temple bells. So where did this ideal day actually kick off for these masters?
It starts very early and with intense mental focus. Way before sunrise, during what's called the Brahma Muhurta. This is the first period, Abhigamanam.
Okay, Brahma Muhurta. We hear that term a lot. It's not just early morning, though, is it? It's super specific. Oh, absolutely specific. The Shastras don't do vague. Brahma Muhurta starts exactly 96 minutes before sunrise, and it ends 48 minutes before sunrise.
Wow.
So, yeah, if sunrise is, say, 6:00 a.m., you're talking about waking up and starting between 4:24 a.m. and 5:12 a.m.
Okay, that's early.
It is. And the reason is that's considered the time when the mind is naturally at its calmest, most receptive. Best time for spiritual focus.
But what if, someone physically can't, maybe health issues or their job involves night shifts? Is there any leeway in the texts?
Well, the Shastras always prioritize Dharma, right? And they do understand limitations. The rule is kind of aspirational. It teaches you what the ideal priority is. If you genuinely can't make that exact window, the instruction is to wake up and begin your service as early as you possibly can.
Okay.
But for the Purvacharyas themselves, this early start was, well, pretty much non-negotiable. It was essential for the very first things they did. Chanting Harinama and then focused meditation.
Right. Let's talk about that mental prep. So they wake up, chant Harinama 7 times. Then what? Where does the mind go?
Immediately to gratitude. Specifically, meditating on the Guru Parampara.
The lineage of teachers.
Exactly. This is absolutely fundamental in Sri Vaishnavism. The understanding is that your connection to Bhagavan, all the knowledge you have, it flows only through the grace of your acharya, your teacher. So the very first conscious act of the day is acknowledging that debt, that channel of grace.
Okay, so gratitude first. Then they dive into these core texts, the Rahasyatrayam. Could you just, maybe briefly for listeners, explain what those 3 secrets are? Why are they so central right at the start?
Sure. The Rahasyatrayam, the 3 secrets, they are really the theological bedrock of the tradition. You have the Mula mantra, which is the 8-syllable mantra about the Lord's supremacy. Then the Daya mantra, a 2-part mantra. It's basically the essence of surrender. Prapati, seeking refuge at the Lord's feet. And the Charama shloka, which is that final verse from the Gita, where Krishna promises liberation to those who surrender completely.
So in those first few quiet minutes, they're not just like reciting words, they're digging into the meaning.
Precisely. They're actively pondering the meaning. They're establishing their whole identity for the day. Who am I? A servant. Who is Bhagavan? The master. What's our relationship? Service. It's setting the stage.
Right.
And this whole initial mental session is kind of capped off by meditating on the Paratsa Panchakam, the 5 states of Bhagavan.
Okay, listing them is one thing. Paratva, Vyuha, Vibhava, Antaryami, Arkavatara. But why meditate on all 5 every day? What does that achieve?
It's about getting a complete picture.
Yes.
If you only focus on one aspect, your understanding of God is incomplete, maybe even skewed.
How so?
Well, Bharatva is the totally transcendent state up in Vaikuntha, basically inaccessible. Vyuha is sort of the cosmic management aspect, like the Lord in the Milky Ocean. Vibhava is the incarnations, like Rama or Krishna, making himself available in history. Antarayami is the inner dweller, the spark within us, but still hard to grasp directly. And then Arkavatara.
The deity form. In the temple or at home?
Exactly. That's the form where Bhagavan makes himself maximally accessible, ready to receive our direct service. So, meditating on all five reminds the devotee of both the Lord's absolute supreme nature and his incredible kindness, his condescension, in making himself available to us right here, right now.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. It's like a quick, total reality check before they even get out of bed, almost.
Yeah.
Which brings them to the next physical step. Sanam, bathing. And you mentioned even the water source is important.
Oh yes, there's a hierarchy. Flowing water, like a river, is considered the best. Then still water, like a pond or lake. And finally, water drawn from a well.
But the key thing is the mindset during the bath, right? Not just the water itself.
Absolutely. The physical act is secondary. The crucial part is meditating that this water isn't just ordinary water. It's flowing from Bhagavan's holy feet, then flowing through the head of one's acharya, and then it reaches the devotee. You're essentially bathing in grace, in sacredness.
And that Ramanujacharya story really brings this home.
It really does. You know, the Kaveri River in Sarangam has all these bathing steps, the Padathirais. Yamacharya, who is Ramanuja's predecessor figure, had his spot upstream from where Ramanuja would later bathe.
Right.
And Ramanuja, purely out of what we call Acharya Nishta, this deep devotion and respect for his teacher, insisted on always bathing downstream from Yamunacharya's spot.
Just to be sure.
Just to be sure that any water molecule that might have flowed past his acharya would reach him. It's symbolic, of course, but it shows the intensity of wanting to receive that grace, that purity, that connection through the teacher.
Wow. That level of dedication, it just infuses everything. Even getting dressed afterwards, right?
Yeah.
Applying the kundram, the tilak.
Exactly. After snanam comes vastradhanam,
Yeah.
dressing. And the way you dress depends on your ashrama, your stage of life. So sannyasis wear the ochre robes, householders typically wear the panchakala.
And the tilak application isn't just slapping on some paste.
Not at all. It's highly ritualized. As they apply the white clay, the thiraman, to 12 specific points on the body, they recite 12 specific names of Bhagavan Keshava, Narayana, Madhava, and so on.
Okay.
And crucially, along with the Lord's names, they also apply the yellow paste, Sri Churnam, reciting the 12 corresponding names of Lakshmi Devi. So you're invoking the presence and grace of both the Lord and the goddess simultaneously, marking the body as their temple.
This leads into the daily duties, the nitya karmas, including Sandhyavandanam, twilight prayers. And the timing here is also super precise relative to sunrise.
Extremely precise. The main part of the prayer, especially the chanting of the sacred Gayatri Japam, must be finished before the sun actually rises over the horizon.
That shows serious commitment.
It does. It's about doing the duty at the exact prescribed moment. Then once the sun is up, they perform the concluding part, the upasthanam. So after all this purification, mental, physical ritual, they finally head back to their home, or matham.
For the last step of this first phase, abhigamanam.
Which is waking up the deity at home. Perhaps singing a suprabhatam, a waking hymn. And performing a brief preparatory puja, maybe washing the Lord's feet symbolically, offering a little water, argyam, just getting ready for the day's main service.
Okay, so that wraps up an incredibly intense period of preparation. The sun's fully up now, and we move into phase 2, upadana.
Upadanam, which simply means collecting or gathering. This is the period dedicated purely to getting everything ready for the main event, the ijya, or worship.
So what does that involve, practically?
It means going out to collect fresh flowers, picking fresh tulasi leaves, which are essential for the worship. It also involves preparing the food offering, the naivedyam, and gathering any other items needed for the Thiruvaradhanam.
And if they're living in a monastery, a matham, how do the rules for monks, sannyasis, play into this?
Well, the rules are very strict for them. A sannyasi is forbidden from plucking flowers or cooking food themselves.
Really?
They have to be completely dependent on their disciples or other lay devotees for these materials. It reinforces detachment, non-ownership, and total reliance on the community and Bhagavan's grace for even the basic means of service.
Interesting. Now, there's another part of Upadanam that isn't about physical gathering, right? The daily temple visit for Mangala Shasanam.
Yes, that's a daily requirement. Even if your main worship, your ijya, is performed at home to your personal deity, the ideal includes visiting the nearest temple every day to perform Mangala Shasanam.
Which means wishing well-being for the Lord.
Exactly. Wishing eternal well-being, auspiciousness, and victory for Bhagavan in his temple form.
But hang on, why would a devotee need to wish victory for Bhagavan? Isn't he inherently all-powerful, always victorious? It seems kind of backwards.
It is a reversal, and that's the whole point. It signifies a profound shift in consciousness, from being self-focused to being Lord-focused.
Explain that more.
Okay, so when you're operating purely from knowledge, Junai, you think, I'm small, I'm vulnerable, Bhagavan is all-powerful, he needs to protect me.
Right. Yeah, makes sense.
But when that knowledge deepens and blossoms into bhakti, into pure love and devotion, your perspective flips. You become overwhelmed with love and concern for the Lord in his accessible form. You think, oh, Bhagavan has so kindly come down here. He's manifesting in this deity form, engaging in his divine play, his leela. I want him to be safe. I want him to be victorious. I want everything to go well for him here.
So the devotee takes on a protective feeling towards God.
Precisely. The devotee starts wishing well-being for the Lord instead of just asking for things from the Lord. It's this incredible psychological shift that really captures the essence of the Sri Vaishnava devotional spirit. It moves beyond intellectual understanding into deep, loving concern.
That desire to serve and protect, it leads perfectly into the third and maybe the main period, Ijya, the worship itself.
Yes. Ijya is the time for Thiruvaratanam, which means sacred worship Sri Aratana. This is the main puja offered to the Archavatara, the deity consecrated in the home or matham.
And it's not just any worship, right? It has to be learned properly.
Absolutely. The specific method of Thiruvaratanam isn't something you just pick up from a book. It has to be formally taught and initiated by one's acharya. It's part of the initiation rites, the yaga samskara.
And even the language used during Ijya reflects this sacredness.
Completely. Everything involved is treated as sacred. We use respectful prefixes like Thiru, which means Shri or sacred for the worship itself, Thiruvaratanam. We don't talk about drinking water used in the ritual. We call it Tirtham, holy water.
Why is that distinction so important?
Because the underlying principle for a dedicated Sri Vaishnava is that ideally you consume nothing, food, water, anything that hasn't first been offered to Bhagavan. Everything has to pass through that sanctifying process of offering first. So the language reflects that transformation.
Okay, but the worship itself, the offering, isn't the absolute end of the process, is it? There's a crucial follow-up act, anuyaga.
Right. Anuyaga literally means the follow-up act or secondary sacrifice. In this context, it specifically refers to consuming the prasadam, the food that was just offered to Bhagavan.
And this isn't just about having lunch. It's considered the completion of the ritual itself.
Exactly. It's seen as the ritual completion of the yaga, the worship. This comes from a principle in the background philosophy, Mimamsa Shastra, called Pratyapati Karma.
Okay, pratipati karma. That sounds technical. Can you unpack that? Why does this principle mean you have to eat the prasadam?
Pratyapati Karma basically deals with the proper disposal or utilization of something that has been used or consecrated in a ritual. In Mimamsa, rituals need a clear beginning and end, and everything used has to have a designated purpose or destination afterwards.
So you can't just throw leftover offerings away.
Not if they've been properly consecrated. Once the food, Naivedhyam, has been offered to the deity, it's ritually transformed. It's now sacred. It can't just be treated as ordinary food or discarded carelessly. It needs to be put to its proper designated sacred use. And for prasadam, the Shastras say the only proper destination, the right place for it, is the stomach of the devotee.
So eating becomes a sacred duty, in a way.
Yes. By consuming the prasadam, you are completing the ritual cycle. You're integrating that divine energy, that blessing, into yourself. The physical act of eating is elevated to a final act of ritual service and acceptance of grace.
That transforms the whole idea of meals. What's the typical timing for all this midday activity? It sounds like it would take a while.
It does, because before the main Thiruvaratanam, you need to perform the second bath of the day, the Mathyanika Snanam, and also the midday Sandhyavandanam prayers. That usually happens around 11:30 a.m. or so.
Okay.
Then the Thiruvaratanam itself can be quite elaborate. And after offering the food, there's often a social aspect too. So realistically, by the time the worship is done, maybe other devotees are served, and the person finally takes their own prasadam anuyaga, it could easily be 1:00 p.m., maybe even 1:03 p.m.
Which, again, is completely impossible for someone with a standard office job.
Totally incompatible with the typical modern workday schedule. And we haven't even mentioned the crucial social rule here. Before you consume your own prasadam, You absolutely must make sure that any other devotees who are present, especially guests or elders, have been fed first. Service to the community, Bhagavata Kainkaryam, is woven right into the personal act of taking sustenance.
Right. So midday rituals done, lunch, or prasadam, finish around 1:30 p.m. What did the masters do next? This brings us to the fourth period, Swadhyaya.
Swatya. This is the period for study and various literary or intellectual activities. It would typically run for the mid-afternoon, say after 1:30 p.m., right up until almost sunset.
And this wasn't just casual reading, was it?
Oh no, this was the powerhouse of the tradition. Swadhyaya covers everything from deep reading of the scriptures, Vedas, Puranas, to intensive writing, like commentaries or original philosophical works. It also includes teaching disciples, giving public discourses, kalakshepams, and actively learning new texts, especially the foundational works of the previous acharyas.
And it seems like for many of the really great masters, this was their main focus. So Swadhyaya could take up most of their day.
Absolutely. Think about someone like Ramanujacharya compiling his massive commentary, the Sri Bhashya. That required years of dedicated, intense intellectual work. For figures like him, this deep philosophical engagement, this sharing of knowledge, was the highest form of service, their primary Kainkaryam.
Does the tradition recognize that? That one activity might dominate?
Yes, the Shastras acknowledge this. They allow for emphasis. If someone is deeply engaged in Swadhyaya, that activity can rightly take precedence. It might mean the other kriyas are performed more concisely to allow maximum time for study and teaching. The focus shifts according to the individual's specific role and contribution.
That makes sense. That focus and efficiency leads us to the final period of the day. Yoga, contemplation, and meditation.
Right. Yoga typically begins in the evening. After the sunset, Sandhya prayers are done, and often after a small, concluding evening, Thruvradahanam might be performed, perhaps around 7:00 p.m. or so.
And what's the focus of this yoga period?
It's a time for quiet, internal reflection. For contemplating those core theological questions we touched on earlier. Who am I really? What is my true essential relationship with Bhagavan? Who is Bhagavan in his deepest nature? It's about internalizing the day's learning and experiences.
And you mentioned earlier, incredibly, that even sleep, nidra, was considered part of this yoga for the acharyas.
Yes, for the truly advanced practitioners, sleep wasn't seen as just blank unconsciousness. It was viewed as a continuation of the experience of Bhagavan. They would use their last waking moments to consciously contemplate the Rahasyatrayam, their service, their surrender.
Yeah.
So that the very act of falling asleep was a transition within that state of contemplation. The idea was that the end of one day's yoga would flow seamlessly, without a complete break in spiritual consciousness, right into the very beginning of the next day's abhigamanam. The whole 24-hour cycle becomes one continuous loop of service and awareness. So now that we've seen the detailed structure, the 5 parts, it's really crucial to understand the mindset driving it all. Why do this? What's the underlying philosophy? And fundamentally, it all boils down to one word: service.
Right. The goal is Kainkaryam. Everything is done to please Bhagavan. But when you follow such a detailed, rigorous routine, doesn't it start to feel like these actions are how you earn liberation? Like, I do X, Y, and Z, therefore I get moksha.
That's a very important distinction. And this is where the Sri Vaishnava perspective is quite unique, quite emphatic. The tradition insists absolutely that liberation, moksha, comes only through the grace of Bhagavan. It's not something you can earn through your actions, no matter how perfectly performed.
So why do the actions then?
You do them purely as an expression of love and service, to please him. That's the only motive. The responsibility for granting liberation rests entirely with the Lord. Our job, our joy is simply the service itself. It decouples action from personal gain, even the ultimate gain of moksha.
That's a major shift, and this focus on pleasing the divine gets even more specific with the concept of acharya nishta, doesn't it? Dedication to the teacher.
Yes, acharya nishta is huge. In many ways, it's considered paramount. For many devotees, their primary focus becomes pleasing their acharya, their guru.
More important than pleasing Bhagavan directly. How does that work?
The reasoning is this. The acharya is the designated channel, the conduit appointed by Bhagavan himself to guide the disciple and transmit grace. So if the acharya is pleased with your service and dedication, then Bhagavan is automatically pleased. Pleasing the representative is taken as pleasing the source. The acharya is seen as the final authority on how service should be rendered.
But couldn't that be risky? Doesn't focusing so intensely on the human teacher risk, creating a kind of personality cult? Shifting focus away from the ultimate goal, Bhagavan.
That's a potential pitfall, absolutely.
Mm.
And the tradition is aware of it. The safeguard is the strict definition of the acharya's role. The acharya is never the destination. They are always, always the path to the destination, which is Bhagavan. Their sole legitimate function is to connect the disciple to the Lord.
So if a teacher started pointing towards themselves.
Then the nishta, the devotion, would be misplaced. But within the ideal framework, assuming the acharya is fulfilling their proper role, service to them is seen as the most effective and direct way to please Bhagavan. In fact, it's considered so important that if a person was completely absorbed day and night in serving their acharya directly,
Yes.
they might actually be excused from strictly following the timetable of all 5 Panchakala Kriyas. Their service to the acharya itself fulfills the requirement of Kainkaryam.
Wow. Okay. So the personal relationship with the guru is key. What about the wider community? The temple seems central too.
Oh, absolutely central. This tradition, historically and theologically, revolves around temples. The daily life, the rhythm of the Purvacharyas, was deeply intertwined with the local temple schedule, especially in major centers like Srenong.
How did that work practically? Did they adjust their home routine based on temple events?
Definitely. Timings for rituals, especially things like taking prasadam, were often coordinated. There was this sense of collective participation.
You mentioned waiting for prasadam earlier. Can you elaborate on how the temple service impacted the home schedule?
Yeah, it was common, especially in big temple towns. Devotees conducting Thrivarathanam in their own homes would specifically wait until the main worship in the central temple was concluded, until the primary deity had received his offerings for that period. It showed respect. It acknowledged that the grand public service to the Lord in his main residence took precedence. Only after that primary service was completed would the devotee feel it appropriate to conclude their own domestic ritual by taking prasadam. It reinforces this idea that you're part of a much larger cosmic ecosystem of service centered on the temple.
So it follows then that for people whose entire lives were dedicated to direct temple service, maybe priests, cooks, garland makers, musicians, cleaners, their work was their Panchakala Prakriya.
Precisely. For someone fully immersed in serving the Lord directly within the temple walls, that service itself is considered complete and sufficient Kainkaryam. The 5-part structure is more a framework for the general devotee living outside that immediate temple environment. The ultimate test always is the intention. Is this action being performed purely to please Bhagavan? If yes, it's valid service.
Okay, now for the main event, maybe. We take this beautiful, incredibly detailed, spiritually profound ideal, and we smash it head-on into the 21st century. Office jobs, commutes, emails, Slack notifications, deadlines. Let's be real, the need to earn money is probably the biggest clash, right? The Purvacharya model wasn't exactly based on salaries.
Not at all. And this is the central dilemma for the modern practitioner. We have to reframe the act of earning a living. It becomes the modern form of upadanam.
Collecting? How so?
Remember, the traditional ideal was you perform your service and your basic needs, food, shelter, are somehow met as a natural consequence, often through community support or patronage. There wasn't this direct work-for-pay model in the same way. Today, earning money is essential upadanam because it's how we collect the resources needed to sustain the very life that is meant to be offered in service.
Okay, so if I'm, say, a software engineer, or I work in marketing, or I manage a team, how does that kind of work fit? Can that be considered shastric, acceptable according to the scriptures?
Well, first, the work itself has to be ethically permissible. It can involve activities explicitly forbidden by the Shastras, things like violence, deception, dealing in prohibited substances, and so on, assuming the job itself is morally acceptable.
Which hopefully most office jobs are.
Hopefully. Then the key differentiator becomes the mindset. You have to consciously reframe why you're doing that work. It's not primarily for personal wealth accumulation or status.
So how do you frame it practically? What should I be telling myself during my commute?
You frame it like this. Bhagavan has entrusted me with this body and perhaps with a family to care for. Taking care of them, providing for their basic needs so that we can all live and serve, is my dharma, my duty. Therefore, I must perform this job diligently and honestly as the means to fulfill that dharma. My work is part of my service to Bhagavan through maintaining the life he has given.
So the work becomes a support function for the ultimate goal of service.
Exactly. It places the 9-to-5 grind within the larger context of Kainkaryam. But, and this is a huge but, there's a major trap here that the sources warn us about constantly.
Which is?
Doing whatever job you want to do may be something ethically questionable or purely driven by greed, and then trying to sanitize it afterwards by saying, oh, I'll just offer the money I make to Krishna.
Right. You can't just stick a for Bhagavan label on the results of bad actions.
Absolutely not. That's a complete misunderstanding. You cannot purify an impure means simply by dedicating the end product. The Shastras insist that the path itself, the work you undertake, must first be deemed acceptable, permissible. Then you perform that acceptable work with the correct devotional mindset. The means have to align with the end.
Okay, that's a critical point. Now this leads straight into another modern minefield, lifestyle inflation. If we're earning money as necessary upadanam just to sustain life, well, what counts as necessary? How do we stop that definition from constantly expanding?
This requires constant vigilance and the practice of vairagyam, detachment.
Easier said than done.
Oh, incredibly difficult, but necessary. The practitioner has to consciously, deliberately draw a line. This much is sufficient for my family's basic needs and simple comfort. Beyond this is excess. And crucially, they have to stick to that line even if their income increases significantly.
So if you get a big raise, the idea isn't to upgrade the house or the car.
Not according to this ideal. The ideal is maintain the simple lifestyle. The surplus income, the extra resources, should then be consciously redirected back into more direct forms of service. Supporting temples, feeding devotees, funding religious education, whatever form that Kainkaryam takes, not used to inflate personal consumption.
Can you give some real-world examples? Where does ego usually creep in and disguise itself as need in our modern financial choices?
Oh, it's everywhere, isn't it? Think about housing. Is the sprawling mansion truly a need, or is a comfortable, functional 3-bedroom house perfectly sufficient? That difference is often ego.
For cars.
Exactly. Does one need the high-status luxury SUV or the latest Tesla, when a reliable, safe, used sedan would fulfill the actual transportation requirement just fine? That desire for the premium brand is usually about ego and status, not practical necessity.
Schooling for kids? That's a big one.
A huge one. Sometimes the insistence on incredibly expensive private schools, when good local public or less costly private options exist, stems more from wanting the social prestige associated with that school, rather than a genuine, demonstrable educational necessity for the child's well-being and development. Vairagyam forces you to ask, what is truly sufficient? What serves the real purpose?
And then you consciously choose sufficiency.
You choose sufficiency. Use the basic functional option, and then critically you take the money, time, and mental energy you saved by not chasing the upgrade, and you channel it back into your primary goal. Kainkaryam.
So the ultimate aim isn't just to manage work and spirituality, but to eventually transition away from the necessity of that income-generating work, ideally before traditional retirement age.
That's the ideal, yes. Secure the basic needs, ensure the family is reasonably provided for, draw that line of sufficiency early, and then dedicate the maximum possible portion of your life, ideally the majority of it, to focused, direct service of Bhagavan and his devotees. The longer you stay entangled in accumulating more than you need, the harder it becomes to detach later on.
Okay, let's tackle that common phrase. Work is worship. It gets used a lot, sometimes to justify working insane hours, taking on multiple jobs, burning out, claiming it's all Bhagavat Kainkaryam, a form of karma yoga.
Yes, and this needs a very clear correction based on the principles we've discussed. Work is worship only under specific conditions.
Condition 1.
The work itself must be shastric, meaning prescribed by or at least acceptable to the scriptures, ethically sound.
Condition 2.
The work must be undertaken primarily to fulfill one's necessary dharma, supporting oneself, supporting one's dependents, maintaining the life needed for service.
So excessive work, grinding away 70 hours a week, taking on side hustles just to fund a fancier lifestyle.
That does not qualify as genuine service or karma yoga in this context. That's usually driven by attachment, desire, maybe insecurity, not by the spirit of selfless Kainkaryam. True karma yoga requires scrutinizing the activity before you do it. Is this necessary? Is this ethically sound? Is my intention pure service? You can't just do whatever you want and slap a worship label on it afterwards. The effort itself has to be aligned with the spiritual goal, not actually pulling you away from it.
Right. Okay, this is making sense. So let's try to pull it all together into a practical plan. For someone listening, working a demanding job, maybe with a family, how can they realistically condense these 5 kriyas into, say, a focused hour and a half each morning?
It requires serious discipline, condensation, and really prioritizing the mental aspects, which are often the core.
So let's walk through it. Abhigamanam, the sacred start.
Wake up as early as you reasonably can. Maybe not 4.24 a.m., but earlier than strictly necessary for work. Dedicate just 15, maybe 20 minutes solely to the mental process. First thing, chant Harinama 7 times. Immediately focus the mind, Guru Parampara. Feel that gratitude. Then, consciously ponder the meaning of the Rahasya Trayam. Briefly contemplate the 5 states, the Pratva Pajakam. Lock in that identity, servant, master, service. That concentrated mental focus is paramount. It sets the tone before anything else happens.
Okay, 15, 20 minutes of focused mind work, then snadam, bathing, no sacred river nearby.
Take your normal shower or bath. But don't just zone out. Maintain the mental discipline we talked about.
Sure.
As the water flows, actively visualize it as grace, coming from Bhagavan through the Acharya, purifying you. Keep that thought active throughout the bath.
Got it. Mental focus during the shower. Now, merging upadanam, collecting, and ijaya worship, this seems like the biggest time block.
Yes, dedicate a solid hour here if possible. This is the core practice. For collecting, if you live in an apartment, maybe you can't have a garden, but you can maintain a small tulasi plant in a pot on a windowsill.
Okay.
Pluck a few fresh leaves from that each morning. That's your upadana.
So manageable.
Then perform a focused, perhaps abbreviated, but sincere Thiruvaradanam to your home deity. Learn a concise version from your acharya or reliable source. Offer the food you prepared for breakfast, naividyam. And then, the non-negotiable part. You and your family strictly only consume that offered food, the prasadam, for your first meal. That whole cycle, plucking tulasi, concise puja, offering food, eating only prasadam, that's your condensed ijjanuyaga. Make that hour sacred.
1 sacred hour. Okay. Now, the really challenging part for many, the devotee finishes this morning routine and has to walk out the door, go to the office, enter the secular world. How do they carry this identity, this devotion, visibly?
This is where courage and conviction come in. The ideal is you go to work proudly wearing the visible markers of your faith, specifically the Urdhva the tilak, and, if applicable based on tradition and stage of life, the shikha, the tuft of hair.
That feels like a really big ask in many modern workplaces, especially the shikha. Is it truly feasible everywhere? Or are there like modern adaptations or dispensations?
This is definitely a point of tension. And while, yes, many workplaces are becoming more accepting, the traditional teaching is quite firm on the fundamentals. The Shastras, for example, state that without the shikha, all other ritual activities performed by someone for whom it's prescribed are considered vyashta, essentially, wasted effort. It's seen as that fundamental to the identity.
Wasted effort. That's
Yeah.
incredibly strong. So if someone feels they absolutely cannot maintain the shikha due to their job, is all their other effort pointless?
It highlights the seriousness with which these markers are viewed. It forces a difficult prioritization. If your job actively prevents you from following a fundamental aspect of your prescribed dharma, the tradition would prompt you to seriously question whether that job is compatible with your spiritual path. Now, if it's genuinely unavoidable due to extreme circumstances, the emphasis shifts even more strongly to maintaining the internal commitment, the mental discipline, the intention. But the ideal of the external marker remains, and its absence is seen as a significant compromise. Guidance from one's acharya is absolutely crucial in navigating such situations.
Okay, so it's a serious consideration, not to be lightly dismissed. What about the tilak? If they wear it and maybe face teasing or mockery, someone chanting Govinda, Govinda at them in the hallway.
The prescribed attitude is, take it positively. Don't react with anger or shame. Think, wonderful. Even though they might mean it mockingly, my presence has caused them to utter the holy name of Bhagavan. You've inadvertently given them a spiritual benefit. Wear the marks with quiet confidence and dignity, fulfilling a basic requirement of the tradition. Don't hide it.
Okay, so navigate the workday with that internal and ideally external identity. Then evening comes. How does Swadhyaya study and yoga contemplation fit in after work?
Use the evening hours. After work, after dinner, after spending necessary time with family, maybe after 6 or 0 or 7:30 or p.m. This is where the modern world actually helps. There's a wealth of resources online. Listen to authentic discourses, kalakshepams, from qualified teachers. Many are available on YouTube, Zoom, dedicated websites. Use this time for focused study of the core texts and commentaries.
So evening study and the final yoga part.
That comes last. As you're winding down, preparing for sleep, use those last conscious moments. Don't just drift off scrolling on your phone. Consciously bring your mind back to the core teachings. Contemplate the meaning of the Rahasya Trayam. Reflect on your relationship with Bhagavan, your identity as his servant. Let that thought be the very last one as you fall asleep. Try to bridge the gap. connecting today's service to tomorrow's apegamanam.
And just to be clear for the listener, what's the recommended sequence for learning and sharing? Should you study first or practice first?
The traditional sequence is clear. Study first. Understand the concepts properly from authentic sources. Then, put it into practice in your own life. Internalize it, live it. Only after you have studied and sincerely practiced should you consider preaching or teaching others. Study, practice, preach, in that order. Otherwise, you risk spreading misunderstanding. #tag outro.
So this deep dive into the Panchakala Prakriya, it really shows it's so much more than just a schedule, doesn't it? It's like an underlying operating system for your day, a way to structure everything around the core principle of service, of Kainkaryam, whether you're in a temple or, stuck in a quarterly review meeting.
Absolutely. And it forces us to confront that need for virajam, for detachment, to really ask ourselves tough questions about what's truly necessary versus what's just accumulation, and to make conscious choices that align our lives with that ultimate goal of service, not just material success.
We also spend a fair bit of time on Acharya Nishta, that intense dedication to pleasing the teacher, the Acharya, and how in some contexts that's seen as the most vital service, maybe even taking precedence over sticking rigidly to the 5 specific kriyas.
Right. And that brings us to a final, maybe provocative thought for you, the listener, to take away and reflect on. Especially for those of us living modern lives, perhaps without daily physical access to our charya. Knowing that Kainkaryam, service, is the ultimate goal, and knowing the supreme importance placed on pleasing the acharya, what is the single most important service you can perform right now today in your current circumstances to truly honor that principle of acharyaneshta? How do you maintain that vital link of grace and ensure your actions, even in relative isolation, are truly aligned with the lineage and pleasing to the tradition?
That's a deep question to ponder as you think about structuring your own day according to these principles. Thank you so much for walking us through this complex, fascinating topic.
My pleasure. Keep studying, keep reflecting, keep practicing, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.
Om Namo Narayanaaya